thought when I talked to this guy in jail, I would be a success story from that program and be able to manage construction sites and go from literally being homeless to making six-figure salary. Now I work for a tech company that specializes in construction technology, and I work from home. I would have never imagined even a year or 2 years ago.
Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast, where I'm dedicated to helping you take control of your life. I'm Sue Saller, and I'm excited to be your host on this journey. I'll be bringing you inspiring stories, practical tips, and expert advice to help you overcome obstacles, set and achieve your goals, and live the life you've always wanted. Together, we'll discover that making small changes is not only possible, but can lead to big results. Join me now as we explore the power of positive thinking, the art of goal setting, and strategies for success. Are you ready? Let's go do this. Welcome to the Small Steps, Big Wins podcast, and I would like to welcome Torre Samonek to our show. Torre is a real estate investor and director at Hammock Sober Living Homes in the Bay Area out in San Francisco. He is also a member, or almost a member, of Gobundance and lives in Vallejo, California. Torre, welcome. I can't wait to hear your story.
Well, number one, thank you for having me on your podcast. I've listened to a few of the episodes. I think you're doing a great job with that. So to me, this is truly an honor. So thank you. This is actually my first podcast I've been on. So go easy on me. But for my background story, my superhero story. So my superhero story is that I grew up in a home full of drugs, violence, financial issues, and I didn't allow that to completely derail or control my life, right? So I've had my fair share of challenges. I've been to juvenile hall 13 times as a youth, almost grew up there, to going to prison for the first time at 19. I walked into San Quentin prison, and the sense that came over me was, number one, oh, you messed up this time, Torre. And then number two, this looks like an old castle, pretty interesting. And but somehow over the years I was able to pull myself out of that situation, and the way I did that is I joined a construction pre-apprenticeship program located in Oakland called the Cypress Mandela Training Center, and that was able to funnel me into the Carpenters Union of Alameda County, so Oakland and Fremont and those cities. So I was able to join the Carpenters Union. I started off as a carpenter apprentice, picking up wood, being yelled at, being told what to do, and over the course of about 5 years, I ended up becoming a construction superintendent, where I was on the opposite end. I was managing the job site. I was coordinating work with the different subcontractor. I was working very closely with design teams, architects, engineers, even city officials when it came to inspections and getting the certificate of occupancy and opening up buildings. And then, somehow along the way, I ended up in the Gobundance ecosystem, and that's how me and you met. And then I started investing in 2020. We started with a house hack. I took a 2-story house, 4 bedrooms, 2 baths, and we turned the bottom floor into a 2-bedroom, 1-bath apartment. And that in itself was a huge push to my mental framework of who I thought I was, how much I could achieve in life. It's very interesting to be an employee and then to do something entrepreneurial, because there is nobody to tell you what to do. You have to be your own pusher. You have to be the person that has the vision, the goal, and the drive to get it done. So that was an interesting process, but we eventually got it done. Me and my wife bought a house for $500,000 in 2020 and got it reappraised for $610 in 2021 after we did all the updates and conversions, and along with some natural appreciation in the crazy market. And we ended up pulling a HELOC on that home and bought a cabin in the Smoky Mountains. So we joined the STR craze. I actually still have that cabin. It's in Sevierville, Tennessee. And me and my wife and my very young baby flew out there and got it all set up in about a week or so. And so that's that. So we had the cabin in Sevierville, and then our original house hack, that first one that we worked on in 2020, we've actually transformed that into a sober living home, and we can definitely touch on what that means, how that operates, and why the hell I would want to do something like that. Yeah, and then the sober living home, it focuses on people that are wrestling with homelessness, addiction, and then re-entering society from incarceration. So a very specific group of people, and I'm happy to support them. I'm happy to serve them any way I can.
Oh, wow. I love the part of your story where you started to turn your life around after going to carpenter school. How and when did the thought of real estate investing enter the picture?
Yeah, yeah, that's a good question. It seriously came up around 2019. So Let me preface that by saying, I've always been into self development as soon as I found out about it. So, podcast after podcast, I ended up just listening to a bunch of personal finance podcasts because my money habits just totally sucked. And the one thing that I kept hearing, specifically on a podcast called Millionaires Unveiled, which is hosted by another person who's in GoBundance, is real estate, real estate, real estate, real estate. So I just figured, well, if everybody that has money is getting into real estate, well, then I'm just going to do what everybody that has money do. And I started looking for real estate. Of course, I come across the Bigger Pockets podcast, and that was back in 2019. And that's what kind of, that was sort of the catalyst for it. So just being exposed to content on the internet, and that sort of gave me that bug for real estate.
Yeah, Bigger Pockets is fantastic. What attracted you to manage a sober living facility or at least turn your first house hack into one?
No, that's a very good question. So you could say I've sort of felt called to it, right? Like I mentioned before, I come from a family that's dealing with addiction. So the idea of being able to help people while make a profit was right in line with my value system. We dabbled in the STR world a little bit. That original house hack that I'm mentioning eventually became an STR, eventually became an MTR. But for me, the constant communications with the guests, the complaints, all the first world problems, I just didn't have the mental fortitude to deal with that, especially when there's people that really need help in the world, people that are living on the streets, people that are escaping domestic violence and things of that nature. I can care less about, having enough Keurig pods and that type of thing. So being able to, when I first heard about it, it felt right in line with something that me and my wife would want to support. And plus, with my own lived experience, I knew that not only could I be good at this, but I think I could also make an impact on some people's lives. So that's sort of what the driving factor is.
Yeah, you make a good point about, that there's different types of real estate out there. You've got commercial, you've got MTR, which is, if anybody listening doesn't know, it's short for medium term rentals. You have STRs, which is short for short term rentals. And there's like all different kinds that people can pursue. So, what works for one person might not work for another. And that you learned it's okay to pivot. What are some challenges that you face with managing a sober living facility where the average multifamily investor might not encounter?
Yeah, good question. So the average investor probably is not seeking out people with bad credit scores and criminal histories, and that's specifically the population that I look to serve. We work with a group of people who just need more help in hand holding than a typical property owner would ever consider to do. The main thing is that it takes time. For instance, after this call, I'm going to go meet up with a gentleman who's actually on parole, and I'm going to move him into my sober living house Saturday in the middle of the day. It's going to take a few of my hours. I need to, introduce him to the house rules, introduce him to everybody on site, and what the processes are. And the average property owner or landlord isn't going to do something like that. Um, there's sometimes I had to pick up members and bring them to the residence. I've had to do that for a certain person that need to move in. I've also had need to purchase staple food products. If somebody comes in and say, "Hey, my food stamps aren't available yet, or I don't have a way to eat," well, I'm damn sure not gonna let somebody go hungry in my house if I can spend $50 to give them a few staples. So that's sort of the stuff. It's way more hands on. It's way more intense. There's things like house rules. A gentleman came home at 2:30 when the house rule says you need to be in by 10 p.m. So that's a conversation that I needed to have with this gentleman about that. And those are just sort of the things, because it's very hands-on, that the typical property owner or investor just doesn't deal with when you're doing the LTR or even MTR and STR stuff.
How did you learn like the mechanics and the ins and out of having a sober living facility? Because as you mentioned, it's different than multifamily. You have to deal with the guy who comes home at 2 a.m. in the morning. And I would imagine if it's a repeated offense, there has to be some kind of consequence. And, there's just a different dynamic when you put a group of people in a home like that. Talk a little bit about how you educated yourself to learn how to do this.
Yeah. Well, number one, I'm still learning every day. I'm still learning. I'll learn when I move this gentleman in. But just to get the basis of the knowledge, I have lived experience with this population. Like I mentioned before, I've been incarcerated. I've exited incarceration, and if you ask me, I think I did a very good job at turning my life around. So I kind of just rely on that and what I think that the challenges that some folks will be facing, and how I've dealt with those challenges and how I was able to succeed or get past them. So my lived experience is one. Number two, I'm a huge consumer of any type of content that can improve mine or other people's lives. So there's one or two podcasts that are available. There's folks in my area that do the same thing that I reach out to number one, introduce myself just so I can be in the ecosystem, and number two, see if they can come by and give me some pointers and critique on what it is that we're doing and how we could be more successful. Even if I need to spend money to get training to learn how to do something better to help collapse the time to get to where I want to go, if I have the money, I will invest it with no issue.
Well, you have an inspirational story and you have an opportunity to share your story with somebody else who's coming out who might not see that hope for the future that you see in them that could be their reality. What kind of support do you have to help you manage your facility? You mentioned that you're there. Do you have any other kind of help for what you do?
Mhm. Yeah, totally. So number one, me and my wife are in this business together. So my wife Brittany does a lot of the administrative stuff. Like for now, she's editing a licensing agreement right now, or she'll do all the AP or the accounting stuff and sending out invoices. So that's a big chunk of it that helps me out. And then number two, we just 2 days ago moved in a live-in house manager in the bottom unit of this duplex that we converted. So now I have an employee as such that can help me do the day to day things, so I don't have to spend as much time being on site. And then thirdly, a lot, or I would say all of the people that we have, all the residents and clients that we have come in, they have case management, whether it's a parole officer or a literal social worker or case manager. And then if we have that good relationship, and we build everything based on relationships, we can tap those resources and say, hey, this person may need some help in this area. And those are conversations and phone calls that I've had. Hey, I think that this person may need a bit more structure in this day in their day. Is there a day program that they can go to, and things like that? If I feel like that would be helpful or beneficial to the client or resident.
I have an interesting question, and feel free not to answer if it's not an appropriate question. So, these people, they're coming out, and obviously, there's a cost involved to this. How is that mitigated?
Got it. No, that's a great question. It depends on the program or the agency that's referring them to us. I can give you a few examples. Like, for instance, we work very closely with nonprofits that deal with people exiting homelessness. And a lot of times, what they'll do is they'll create an attrition program between themselves and then the client, where they'll say, hey, we're going to pay 100% of your cost for 3 months, but then the next 3 months you need to pay 25%, then 50%, 75%, till eventually you're on your own. And we're hoping during that, that process and that time, you're getting on your feet, you're getting a job, you're saving a few bucks. So when it's time for you to have that financial burden, which is just what the rest of the population and society does, they have to pay for themselves to live, that person will be able to stand up and be able to handle it. So that's how some of the nonprofits work. Now, if I'm working with a behavioral health client, they may, in most circumstances, have their costs 100% covered either by the nonprofit that's supporting them, or what's now happening in the county I work, we're moving to what they call the Medicaid model, where the county is in charge of all housing related to addiction or behavioral health, and then the county will pay 100%. And the same thing with the probation or folks that are re-entering society, probation will pay 100% for them.
Oh, okay. Okay. Are there also agencies that you work with? Do they provide services for these people to help them with the financial side? Because I could see, besides getting a job, I could see the financial aspect being very challenging for them because they've got to change some habits. They have to learn new techniques for handling their money.
So, like for instance, one particular program that comes to mind is an 18-month shelter program. It's also like a detox and addiction treatment, where they will live there for free and they are forced to, get a job and save money. So when they exit that program, they've been through all type of financial education classes, and they even have a few bucks of their own to sort of start as a nest egg. So a lot of the agencies that I work with, unless they're related to behavioral health, they have some sort of financial education that they'll provide to their folks, including probation. including probation. Now, on my end, what I would like to do when possible, because I have that lived experience and I know what it's like to literally have no money and sleep outside, and to where I'm at now, I try to just express to folks, here's where I've been, here's where I'm at now, here's sort of how I've done that. And if they're open to the conversation, then we can get deeper into it. Or if it's they're not really interested, I won't really waste my time or their time.
And how many units do you have now?
So we really just started actually. We started marketing this whole process back in December. I technically opened it in January when really what that meant was I had it all the furnitures and fixtures in there, and I was hosting open houses for the agencies and the nonprofits around. And we didn't get our first referral until the middle of February. So I currently have one home, and it's the duplex conversion. So it's a unit on top and a unit on bottom. So I have availability for about 10 folks. And then when that one fills up, then the home that I'm in now, we will do the same thing, convert it, and we'll move out of here. And then we could support some more people here as well.
Oh, wow, what a beautiful vision. I love it. I mean, where you're coming from also hits home for me as well because, I had a stepdaughter who, died of a heroin overdose, and, we wonder if her, outcome in life would have been a little bit different, so I really applaud you for what you're doing. I think it just amazing. I'm excited to see where this is going to go. It can only go up, right, from where you are. So, you must have some stories. You have a couple stories you can tell us about your experiences managing this type of facility?
Yeah, totally. I have a good story. I have a good story. So I had a gentleman move in. He was on probation. He was nearing the end of his probation. He had family that lived in Texas. When I met him and we went through the intake and the screening process, he expressed to me, "Hey Tori, I'm just trying to get off probation. I don't want any trouble. I don't want any drama. If as soon as I'm off probation, I can move with my wife and kids in Texas, and I can continue on with my life." And that was my first probation referral. So I was a little, wary about, how is this going to play out? And I did my best to support the gentleman, and he had a job, and he did all the things he needed to do. And long story short, he got off probation, he moved out, and he moved states, and now hopefully he's still doing good. And this was very recently, this was 2 weeks ago. So that's a successful story of somebody came to our sober living house, and it's called Daryl's house, by the way, and that's named after a good friend of mine who was tragically murdered one morning on his way to work. Um, yeah, back in 2016 in West Oakland. Yeah. So that was a story of somebody who came to Daryl's house to get some stuff right in their life and to move on. And that's exactly what happened. And he was successful. So to me, that's what it's all about. Yes, we can make money here. I'm going to make money no matter what. I'm in real estate, but to also make an impact in society, because it's not just that guy. He has kids. He has a wife. Now, think about the trickle down effect of that. How will that influence the next generations? The same thing with me, with my children. If I was still living a different life, things would be different, but I'm not. They see their father as somebody who gets up every day, goes to work, a member of society, tries to give back. So I always think about the trickle down effect, and that's the biggest part of it for me. How we can inspire and help people.
Wow, that's beautiful. Talk about some small steps you took that you didn't think were gonna have big results in your life. I mean, you already unpacked some of them. Is there anything else you wanted to chime in on?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think my whole life's been full of small steps that ended up getting bigger without me knowing how it would end up. The first thing that I can point to is joined the Carpenters Union in 2010. But even before that, really, I joined the pre-apprenticeship program that gave me some basic construction skills that funneled me there. But even before I joined that, I was in Superior Court in Oakland. I was in jail for 13 months, and I was talking to a guy, and he said, "Hey, when I was out, I was doing construction. I joined this program XYZ." And then the next day in jail, we were all passing around the newspaper like you do in jail, in county jail, and I open up the page, and what do I see is an advertisement for the program Cypress Mindell that he was just talking about. So those small conversations and being open to a different lifestyle sort of helped me get here. I never thought when I talking to this guy in jail, people were just BSing in jail like they always do, or to the time when I opened up that newspaper that, I would be a success story from that program and be able to manage construction sites and go from literally being homeless to making six-figure salary, and now to even now where I was able to leverage that experience for being on construction sites and managing construction sites. Now I work for a tech company that specializes in construction technology, and I work from home. in a role that's titled a customer success manager. That basically means I'm an account manager for all these different construction companies. So it's like I would have never imagined even a year or 2 years ago, but it's just a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. And the next thing, boom, things are.
Yeah, it's like waking up and went, "Holy crap," like my life was there to where it is now. Just to give us some time frame perspective, if you don't mind sharing from when you were 19 to now, like what's the time frame on that? Because I'd botch it if I tried to guess how old you were.
Oh, yeah, I'm 36. I'm 36. So the time frame is this: the first time I walked into prison, and say the only time, I was 19. I got out and I went right back because I was just a knucklehead, and I lived a life where I thought that the things that I did were okay because that's all I knew. I eventually got out of jail when I was 23 years old, actually on April 1st in 2010. So every time April 1st comes around, I kind of just say a little prayer that I'm still doing what I'm doing. And so that was very recently, actually. So then when I was 23, I got out. That was 2010, and I pretty much got into the industry in January of 2011. So from 2011 up to 2015, I was through my carpenter apprenticeship, and by the end of my apprenticeship, I was already a foreman managing construction crews and doing that. Then I ended up, the next year, 2016, becoming an assistant superintendent for a very large contractor on a $200 million data center project. Up to 2021, I was still in that superintendent's role, just increasing the size of jobs and responsibility up until 2022, excuse me, when I was able to start working for the company I'm with now called Pro Planner, and we sell construction scheduling technology. So that's sort of the articulation to get up to this.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that because I think sometimes when we hear people's stories, we forget the time frame and the context. And to hear a story like yours, someone I can imagine, I mean, I did it, and that's why I asked the question, would be, wow, did he just do this in the last 2 or 3 or 4 years? And you know what? I'm glad you shared that because my point is for anybody who's listening, a lot of this success doesn't happen overnight. And we have to divorce ourselves from this instant world that convinces us that we should have something right away. Right away, we should have the $600,000 house and the $150,000 year job. Now, don't get me wrong, there are people out there that do that and they can certainly, that abundance that's in this life of ours is free and available to everybody. I don't take from you, you don't take from me. We have to go look for it. It's out there, right? But I think what's beautiful about your story is that it did take time. You are where you are today because of your persistence, your grit, and then having your eyes open to opportunities that were in front of you. So, if you could go back in time to your younger self and deliver a message, what would you tell your younger self and why?
That's good. That's a very good question. I think the first thing I would say is you are worth it. Whatever it is that you're pursuing, whatever aspirations that you have, regardless of the circumstance, regardless of when you open your eyes and what you see is your reality, you are worth it, whatever you are aspiring to. And if I would have realized that, then I probably at an earlier age would have aspired to be better. But I was stuck in my box of thinking. So that's number one. And that's just because I'm a human being, and that goes for any human being. You're worth it just because you exist, and that's all that freaking matters. And then number two, to have the confidence in yourself, to have a goal that you don't see any way of how it would happen, stick to that goal and then break it down so every day, week, or month you're making a little bit of progress because the time's gonna pass anyway. And it's like, do you want to look back and say, hey, what have I been doing for 5, 10 years? Or do you want to look back and say, you know what? I've been tracking to a goal and I can compare where I started at to where I'm at now. And I feel good about that.
What are some daily habits that you do today that help you achieve the life you're living?
I'm a huge consumer of self development and positive psychology content, whether that's reading or listening to an audible book, whether that's listening to a podcast like yours, whether that's being on YouTube or reading a blog. Once I found out about self development, once I found out that I can change my life and it wasn't dependent upon a institution or a person or some government agency, that has been my addiction. So on a daily basis, probably too much, I'm consuming content. But it's helped me so much that now the way that I perceive the world, it's from the lens of all the content that I consume, and it's always about how I can do better. And so it's no longer so much that I look at other people and get jealous. Now I look at other people and say, okay, it's doable because you've done it, it's doable. And if I want that, I can aspire to it. So I would say just being in that, the thing I do on a daily basis is being in the frame of mind of self development and improving myself.
You make a really good point too. It's on you, right? You can go after it. It's available to you. You can make that improvement. What is available to you is available to anybody else. It's all out there. The content is out there. It's the drive and the will to want to change behind it that's going to get you from point A to point B. If you don't want to change, then you're probably not going to change. But you wanted to change when you're hungry for that development and hungry for that growth. You just want more and more of it. What are some of the challenges that you have now, and how do you overcome those or work through what you have in front of you?
I've come to realize that the biggest challenge I have in life is Tori, is my own mindset, my own limiting beliefs, my own restrictions on how far I can go. So to answer your question, I'm beginning to learn to not listen to the voice in my head that makes issues bigger than they really are, which cause me to procrastinate. I think that there's a lot of power in breaking a problem down to the next step, the next small necessary action to keep going. And I'm dealing with that currently. I'm not seeing the success with the sober living home as fast as I want it to come. I want it to be a microwave dinner, right? I want it to go immediately as soon as I open it, but that's not how life works. So I'm having to remind myself to only focus on the next step and not get caught up in the end result. So similar to your title, the small steps lead to big wins, and that really resonates with me.
Oh, that's nice. Yeah, you made a point there. Growth never happens as fast as we want it to, does it? And I know in what's the book? It is The Gap and the Gain. He talks about when you compare yourself, don't compare yourself to others, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. So I always say, and I'm sure you do it too, don't compare yourself to where you were last week. Look at where you were last year. Look at where you were 3 years ago. There's a lot of growth there. So, and we have to remember and remind ourselves to give ourselves some grace. So, growth never happens as fast as we want it to. You talked very briefly about limiting beliefs. Can you share like a limiting belief that you had that you silenced and maybe how you did that?
Yeah, okay. It's kind of a personal question, but I'll answer it as plainly as I can.
You don't
So
you don't have to. I can take it out.
no, it's good. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. I would say the number one limiting belief that I have is the idea that other people that are, as I perceive them, farther along or doing better than me means that they're a better person than I am in some way, shape, or form. And the other thing is, I have this voice that can lock in if I'm talking to somebody and they're doing better than me. That starts rationalizing why that is. Oh, they came from a better family than me. Their mom tucked them in bed at night and kissed them on the cheek. They didn't get woken up by the police at 8 years old when their stepdad beating the hell out of their mom. Like all those little things kind of control how you think about yourself. So just learning to not react to that voice and and treat other humans like they're human beings, not like they're some special character. So I'd say that's one of the main things is just realizing that because I'm perceiving that somebody's doing better than me, that doesn't mean they're a better person than I am in some way. And I'm still learning that every day, even now.
Yeah, our limiting beliefs really can get personal too, because there's a part of us that we have to face that inner self, that little inner voice that talks to us and tells us that we can't do or we can't be any better. But once we recognize them, like you have, and then you might not be able to eradicate them, but at least you can combat them with some truth that you have.
I would say it's about realizing that it's just a freaking lie. It's not true. It's your brain trying to prevent you from hurting yourself by exposing yourself to something new. So your brain's trying to help you, but it's not helping you, if that makes sense. And that's kind of what I learned to work through as I deal with therapists and coaches.
Is there something that you wanted to talk about that maybe I didn't ask?
Yeah, totally. So I'm a big proponent of self development, like I mentioned, anything that I can do to further myself along and once again collapse time. And one thing that I do to sort of help me with some of the mental challenges and limiting beliefs and dealing with all the trauma and drama from growing up the way that I did is I've been open and I've been on a journey where I'm dealing with plant medicine. Some people call them psychedelics. where I've been able to consume some of these plant medicines that come right from the earth and make just years of progress around limiting beliefs and issues and confidence issues and things like that. And some of these stories can be sort of woo woo and out there, but I'll give you a very good example if you're fine with talking about this stuff.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, totally. And where I live, it's legal in certain parts of California. So mushrooms, psilocybin. I took some mushrooms back in probably 2018, and I was really my whole life struggling with confidence issues. Right, we can go into why, but growing up the way I did, it's not very easy to be confident in yourself. And I was sitting in a trip, right, and the thought came to mind like, what is confidence? And I just heard a voice so clear in my head that just said, confidence is looking people in the eye. And I could never look people in the eye for some reason. It was hard to do. But ever since that day, you'll probably tell me to stop looking at you in the eye. You're being too intense, Tori. Stop looking at me. But it was just a small little thing that had tremendous exponential value in my life that I don't know if I would have came to that very simple, very clear resolution for something that was really holding me up any other way. I don't know if I would have.
Okay, so now I'm more curious. Do you do the like, when you take the mushrooms, is it in a controlled setting and you have people that have either coached you or you have a plan? I'm very curious.
Yeah, totally. So I was coached the same way I get coached to most of the things I do in life by just consuming information by reading or whatever. So there's a gentleman who has since passed by the name of Terrence McKinnon. So I sort of follow the Terrence McKinnon protocol where when I do these mushrooms, I'll do them. It's not really a party drug for me type of deal. It's me being in a dark room with the lights off with some specific music where I'm trying to get in tune with the deeper part of my consciousness to expose some of the wounds and issues that I've dealt with so I can get closure on those so I can move on in life and be a more complete human. So that's sort of the setup on how I would do that. Now, I've also been into some different circles where it was being administered by a shaman when I took ayahuasca for the 3 times, which was a different scenario where I would rely on the shaman and to sort of facilitate the whole scenario.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I think, at least for me personally, I'm glad you did because I've heard it before. I've heard of others who have done it, but I've never got into the mechanics of it. So, yeah, I appreciate that. Um, Book recommendations. You said you're a consumer of podcasts, you've been Bigger Pockets, you've done self-development. What do you recommend? And it could be podcast, book, doesn't matter.
Yeah, so I would say I'm a voracious reader or listener these days. I'm a voracious listener. You've already hit on one of the books, so you kind of stole some of my thunder. The Gap in the Game by Dr. Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. I actually referenced that earlier when I said comparing myself to when I started to where I'm at now. That has been so freaking huge in my life that it helps me frame things differently. Whereas if I would be in a situation that some people could look at, oh, that's a negative situation. For instance, I haven't got paid by the county yet in 2 months. There's a problem associated with their process. Normally I'd be freaking out about that. But now with this sort of gap in the game mindset, I'm actually coming to the conclusion that I'm learning a process about this county that can be valuable, and I'm gaining what is called wisdom through this scenario. So I'll know how to avoid this situation, hopefully in the future. And furthermore, I can help other people avoid this situation because I've been through it. So that's one of the books, The Gap in the Game, comparing myself from where I started to where I'm at now, but never comparing myself to other people because it's unrealistic. Another book that which I've read before that by the same authors, which was just freaking phenomenal, is Who Not How. And the concept of that book is it's no need for you to learn every single little thing about every subject or task that you need to partake in. It's more valuable to you to find somebody else that is an expert and just let them do it. Don't worry about it. So for me, I'm a control freak. I have to be just the way I grew up, or else I wouldn't be safe. So if I'm not in control of something, I feel really wary about that. So it's starting to help me let go and find the professionals that can handle things for us. And sometimes that's a construction related task. Sometimes it's me hiring a CPA, not and just being confident that I've screened the CPA and they have enough recommendations that it's going to come out the way I need it to. So that's another example. And then the third book is Scott Trench's Set for Life. So depending on where you're at in your journey in going to FIRE or financial independence, that book can be a complete game changer. When I first started listening to bigger pockets, I was like, how am I going to make all this happen? How am I going to go buy a 300 unit this or that? It just didn't seem realistic. But when I read Scott Trench's Set for Life book, it literally gave me a roadmap. Do this, then save $25,000. After that, you can think about buying a house hack. After that, you can think about this. And I literally just all that prescription. And I go back to that book maybe once a year or once every 2 years, because the farther I get along in life, the more advanced principles in the book apply to where I'm at now. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. I want to ask you, what's your either 3 or 5 year vision?
Got yeah. I can't do a 5 year vision because I know it'll be something completely different. Our goal for our 3 year vision is to have 4 sober living homes in this county that we're in, and then somehow, and I don't know how it's going to happen. I'm not worried about how it's going to happen. Get into affordable housing development, where when you hear certain cities, they'll take an old drug infested Motel 6 and turn it into affordable housing development, or even breaking ground on just a clear plot of land and building up affordable housing. I want to get into that. I want to be involved, and I want to be a developer who builds and manages these type of construction projects. And then on the back end, I want to still be involved with the ownership of it. So I have no clue how I'm gonna get there. That's sort of that who not how thing where it's a goal and we'll figure it out as we go.
That's a beautiful vision. There's a part of me that just believes that's going to happen.
Yeah, I'm a conversation away. Somewhere, somehow, I'm a conversation away from learning it all.
That's right. All things happen in perfect timing, don't they? The teacher appears when the student is ready to learn, or the mentor will show up when you are ripe and ready to learn something. And I think that's very true. Real estate, your goals, whatever you decide to do in life. But I think the most important thing is to have some vision. And I know there's a lot of people who wander around in life. And quite honestly, that was my past. I wandered around in life without a vision. You just go day to day and you just like, you get up and you do the same thing over and over and over again. And when you lack that vision, it's very difficult. You get stuck in a cycle and it can become very depressing and spiraling downward when you don't see any progress going forth. Tori, I got a question. You seem like you either are faith based or you have a certain set of belief system that really drives you. Would you mind talking about what that might be for you, what that looks like for you?
I think it's funny that you say I'm faith based because I had zero faith in anything until very recently, and we can go off on a tangent about how psychedelics sort of played into this, where it gave me the belief that there's something bigger and more powerful in this world. And if I can just have the faith in that, then I can just relieve myself from a lot of stress. So, very recently, I've been feeling that. But prior to that, so when I was a youth, I'd gotten a lot of trouble, more than we'll have time to get into right now. But for some reason, at about 12 or 13 years old, I just made the clear decision that I don't want to do things that are going to harm people, whether that's stealing from them or being violent or anything like that. Not to say I was violent at all, but you're like breaking into homes and just being a real jackass knucklehead of a kid. And I just one day just had the realization that I don't want to live life like that. And I think about from that point on, to my detriment, I've been unbelievably honest in communications with people. And I've just had the idea that if I'm doing something, I don't want to hurt people. I want to help people. And it's came up in different ways, but that's just sort of been my guiding principle, I guess, if you would call it that. How to help without hurting.
Oh, that's no, that's great. I mean, and that comes through in your story too, with your desire to have the sober living facility. I mean, really just give back and be kind to people because that's a population that isn't always widely accepted or welcomed back into society, and you're creating that portal for them to be able to hopefully get back on their feet and succeed. And from what you resolved yourself to do at age 12, 13, I hope you see, at least I see it coming to life now. From your story, what's something that our listeners can do today that might help them change their tomorrow? Like practical application advice, even a takeaway, something they could do this week.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how practical or takeaway advice this is, but for me, I would say just to really consider, and this is something I do all the time. Are you living your life to your full potential? And if the answer is no, do something about it. Like for me, I had a job I hated in construction. I woke up at 4 a.m. I would get home at 8:30 p.m. I would be responsible for the lives of 200 men and women that didn't give a shit. Like it was a lot, right? It was a lot. And one day does this serve me? And I realized that it didn't. And that's how I ended up with the job I have now, working in construction tech. So just being truthful with yourself and being able to critique yourself. That's another thing. Just learn to critique yourself, but not put yourself down, not in a harmful way, but just be realistic. Is the path I'm on, is that going to get me where I want to go? And if the answer is no, then just do something about it.
So when you realized in your construction job that, this is not what I want to do every day, I'm just done with this. Like, what were some actual small steps that you took? Because, like, I hear you, you went from that to where you are now. Take yourself back into that time right there, and what are some practical things that you did do?
Sure, certainly, yeah. I mean, and this might not be very practical to the next person because it's very specific to me. But I made the decision. I made the decision that what I'm doing now is not benefiting me. So from that point, I started putting in job applications to other places. I started talking to other people. I think the energy around me changed when I did that. And then from there, on LinkedIn, this construction scheduling company hit me up, basically attempting to sell me their services. And then when you're open, and then when you have a goal, when you have a desire, you can realize when there's an opportunity in front of you that you can advance on. And that's what I did. So instead of me being a purchaser of this, I said, do you think that you guys would have a better job selling your services if you had an actual construction superintendent with hands-on experience? And the guy didn't answer for a day, but then he came back and said, I think without a doubt, you want to chat? And we chatted. I ended up meeting the CEO. I work for a construction technology startup where I have equity in this tech startup. Last year, I was a construction worker. This year, I'm in the tech industry. Not to say that's the end all be all, but for me, that's been a sort of a sideline goal for a while, is to be able to work in a different capacity and also work in the tech space. And that's what I'm doing now every single day.
Yeah. So whether you realize it or not, you had a little bit of a vision a couple of years ago. It's just now starting to play out a little differently. And I want to capture in your story right there. First of all, I want to tell you, even though it was specific to you, I'm glad you shared it, because what I captured or what I heard was that when you decided to leave your job and you realized it wasn't serving you, you had a mindset shift. And I think anybody who is in a spot where they don't want to be, when you get that mindset shift and you start looking for other things in other places, you start seeing stuff that you didn't see before. And that sounds like that was your experience.
100%, 100%. Once I made the decision, I became more open to opportunities. And when the opportunities presented themselves, then I can make an informed decision that, hey, this is something I want to go after because it's in line with my goals and desire. But the catalyst to all this was making a decision about doing something.
Taking the action. I have another book coming to mind. It's Ready, Fire, Aim. Have you read that one as well?
Not yet, but I'm going to put it on my list.
No, well, I don't know if you need to, because really the whole basis of the book is just, go forth, take action. And it's on the same line of who, not how, where you're just going to go jump. You need to go do that thing. Go do it. And then you'll figure it out and course correct while you're while you're in the midst of doing that.
Kind of
So
like the concept of failing fast, right? And that's something I try to do.
yeah, failing fast. Yeah, same thing, same thing. Did you have or would you be willing to share any fears that you might have had in anything, whether leaving your job or whatever, and how you mitigate those, overcome those?
Yeah, I mean, I personally deal with huge imposter syndrome, and it seems like anything that I do. I've been in the construction industry for over 10 years. I still have that walking onto a job site. So that's something that I have now, even being a customer success manager, working for this great company and a great opportunity, is sort of that imposter syndrome. And how I deal with that, I don't know if I got an actual framework or a process, but there's something to be said about just doing stuff, just building stuff, just working on stuff and sort of letting things play out the way they play out. And I guess part of that imposter syndrome is part of that perfectionism where I don't want to fail because then I will feel bad about myself, right? So also being okay with being wrong. And I'm still a work in process with this, but just being okay with being wrong and just taking those chances and just doing stuff.
Oh, wow. That's some great advice. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Tori, I want to thank you for being on my podcast. This has been an amazing interview, and I'm so glad that we connected. How could people reach out to you?
Totally, yeah. You can hit me up on IG. You can find me at the word T money underscore the word real estate underscore investor. I post every now and then about some of the stuff we're doing with sober living, some of the stuff we're doing with investing. So if you're interested, give me a follow.
Right. Well, again, thank you for your time. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Sue. I appreciate this. It was a great opportunity, and I'm happy to be on this great podcast. Thanks.
I want to thank you for listening to my podcast. I value your time with me because I realize you could be listening to someone else right now. If you got any value or think someone else can benefit from what you heard, please spread the word, hit subscribe, and check out my website at www.suesaller.com. Remember, life doesn't get better by chance, it gets better by choice. Take small steps and make today awesome, friends. Have a great day and God bless.